Did you hear that California is about to become the first state in the union to give out reparations to people based on their skin color? And you can bet if it happens in California, it's going to start a movement nationwide to have reparations in every state. Well, I'll tell you why this proposal is not only racist itself, but illegal, and how much it will end up costing you if it's implemented. I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California, and in this state, the far left politicians who control every lever of government, they are now trying to propose reparations be provided. Now, reparations used to be a fringe, bizarre concept that only crackpots used to suggest. They used to say that we need to give reparations to Black people because of slavery that happened, 150 years ago? California decided to pursue this idea. In 2020, Governor Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in the state legislature passed a bill that provides for a commission to study not whether reparations should be given out, but how to give out reparations. Oh, they're skipping over the justification part. They don't want you to even consider that to be a debate. No, they're trying to figure out, well, how much should we be giving out on the basis of skin color to people who were never slaves? And it's not just the state of California looking at reparations. The city of San Francisco has its own reparations proposal. Now, I want to start out first by making sure you understand that California entered the Union in the 1850s as a free state. We have had no slavery in the state of California. And yet, California may be the first state in the union to basically increase taxes and give out money for people based upon the alleged impact today to people living today for slavery 150 years ago. California also has massive fiscal problems and budget deficits. So the question is going to be, how in the world would we pay for this? And I'll tell you about how much it's going to cost in just a minute. We're not talking about a small amount of money. And we're not talking about people who are descendants of slaves. We're talking literally about giveaways, handouts to people based upon whether they have the right skin color. And in California, the people who don't have the right skin color will be forced to foot the bill. So let's talk about the California Reparations Commission. Let me share with you some video from ABC 10 News. And I think you'll notice the one-sided coverage of this story just by listening in. Let's hear it, shall we?
California's first in the nation statewide reparations task force is meeting today and tomorrow in downtown Sacramento. And members are working on recommendations for state lawmakers on what form reparations should take in the state of California. And the goal is to help make amends for the generations of harm to African Americans caused by slavery and its longstanding effects in society. Becca Hobbecker brings us the conversation from today.
All right. Stop right there. The anchor teased this up by saying how we would give out reparations, not why, not whether it's justified. And then she goes along and says that, well, obviously there is a justification because there are long-standing effects in society today because we had slavery 150 years ago. Makes it a statement of fact, not an argument. There is no room, by the way, to argue that perhaps these reparations are not necessary and not justified. There is no room for that suggestion. Here's a clip of the meeting.
Capital, money, reparations. That will stimulate this economy for the 2.6 million blacks in California.
Dozens of people lined up to speak at day one of the California Reparations Task Force's March meeting held this month in Sacramento. They offered various perspectives on how reparations should look for Black Californians.
Now, let me just say, take a look at the participants of the meeting. And I'm not talking about skin color. I'm talking about not a whole lot of people are there. And it's attended by people who seemingly would be the ones receiving the benefit. And so I don't think that this is a commission that's looking at all sides. In fact, when you look at the membership, the commissioners themselves, They're all activists. These are all people who are full tilt sold on the notion that somehow we have institutional racism everywhere and that slavery from 150 years ago still is causing adverse effects to people today. And those people are victims and they need to be made whole. There's no conversation here. There's no deliberation. There's no studying. There's no weighing. There's no balance. It is a one-sided mob developing the craziest of proposals. And then it will be served up by the media, as you just saw from the way that this clip was introduced by the reporter at ABC 10. It'll be served up as something that should be unassailable, that it shouldn't be questioned, that we have to give reparations. So let's talk about the legal justification of reparations. Let's talk about what they're actually proposing and how much it's going to end up costing if these proposals are implemented. The state of California basically started out by saying, we're going to look at descendants of slaves, and we're looking at the impacts of slavery. And they very quickly realized that they didn't have a case to justify that there was an impact from slavery today. So then they decided to just throw all the slavery connections out. They simply said, California is racist through and through, despite the fact that it's been governed by a supermajority of Democrats for decades. California is institutionally racist. And so you should be given reparations simply because of the color of your skin. They say if you lived in a neighborhood that was predominantly black and you have the right skin color, you get money. If you got arrested for a crime and went to jail, that's right, it was a racist arrest, so you get money. When you take a look at the qualifications or the trigger for someone earning reparations, it really does boil down to if your skin color is the right tone, you are a victim. If your skin color is the wrong tone, you are a victimizer and you should have to pay. How much? The state commission has been looking at upwards of $360,000 per African American in the state. Again, to people who never were slaves in a state that never allowed slavery. Not to be outdone, the city of San Francisco developed its own commission on reparations, and it just released its bat-blank crazy proposals. They are proposing an immediate cash payout of $5 million to every African American in San Francisco. They will also eliminate all personal debt and tax burdens for African Americans. They then will guarantee incomes of at least $97,000 indexed for inflation for 250 years. That's right, for 250 years. And the African Americans in San Francisco will all be given a home for $1 for each family. I mean, why not promise eternal life? Flying unicorns. I mean, what else are you going to be giving out? I mean, this is untethered from reality if you can add up how much money this is going to cost. Now, you might say, this is about time for me to join the left in their crazy philosophy and say, I identify as a black person. And apparently some of those leftists say that you can certainly choose your own ethnicity or your own gender even. No. The city's task force has a way of holding you accountable for that. They say that you must have identified as a black person in at least one government document over the past 10 years. So you have to have identified as a black person in the last 10 years. Now, it doesn't say that you have to have lived in San Francisco for 10 years. So I can see this maybe as some clever plot or ploy because so many people are fleeing San Francisco in record numbers. Maybe this is a way for San Francisco to try to restock its population because it's become an unlivable city, but who knows? Again, that would suppose any form of logic to the people making these proposals. Now, how much would it cost to give $5 million per African American in San Francisco? Well, the Hoover Institute projects that tab would be $175 billion. And that is 13 times San Francisco's already bloated city budget. It's all but it's larger than the annual spending of all states in the union but 3. And California is obviously one of those states. $300 billion. It's almost 2/3 of the state's entire budget just in San Francisco alone. Now that cost estimate was made prior to these other goodies being added because that was just based on the $5 million. If you eliminate personal debt, absolve them of ever having to pay taxes, although that is actually a pretty fun idea, give guaranteed incomes of $97,000 for 250 years, and give free homes out in San Francisco for $1 per family, you're talking trillions of dollars. In other words, you're talking about a proposal that is a stunt, that is completely unworkable. Now let's talk about the state proposal: $360,000 per African American in the state. That would be $1 trillion of reparations in California alone. $1 trillion in just California. Or it would equate to an immediate payment required of any non-African Americans in California of $23,885 per man, woman, and child in the state of California. This is insane. $1 trillion. Now, why? Why are they suggesting that these massive payouts be given at a cost that is staggering to even contemplate? Well, probably it's because the Democrats behind this proposal, the activist groups behind this proposal, they know that this does not have a chance of becoming, it probably has a chance of them passing the law, but it won't be upheld in court. And let me explain why. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which officially apologized for the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Democrat President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had shipped a number of Japanese American citizens to internment camps during World War II, held them there without their consent, and violated their civil rights. There's no question about it. Now, by 1988, reparations were finally agreed to, and the bill that Reagan signed provided an immediate payment of $20,000 in 1988 to some 80,000 living survivors. Now, these are people who actually were put in the camps, not their descendant, not their second cousin twice removed, but the people who actually suffered the heinous injury. Now, adjusted for inflation, the $20,000 payments from 1988 would be $52,735 in today's numbers. So compare people who actually were put into camps, whose direct civil rights were violated for years, who still were alive. Compare what we gave them in 1988 in today's dollars, $52,735, to $5 million plus all the other goodies in San Francisco for people who weren't slaves. Compare it. Or compare the $52,735 for the Japanese Americans indexed for today to the $365,000 or $360,000 that the California State Commission is looking at for reparations. Again, for people who are not slaves. This is an unjust proposal. It's not just. It's not justified. More importantly, it's not legal, because the Supreme Court has had a number of cases where it has looked at race-based preferences and reparations or compensation for government injury, government-caused injury. The Supreme Court has said time and time again that the payment by government to an injured party has to be individual, not collective. It has to be based on individual findings that that individual was harmed. Second, it must be a direct policy of government, not of society, of government. And third, it must be time-based. It must be in a recent period, not long ago. So if you look at Richmond versus J.R. Croson, The Supreme Court ruled that government cannot provide race-based remedies that are ageless in their reach into the past. And this is what these proposals are doing. They're saying, hey, this all started with slavery, institutional racism over 150 years, again, without specifying what the institutional racism is. In Hammond versus Berry, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals struck down affirmative action for Black people for discrimination that occurred as recently as 18 years in the past. Supreme Court upheld that ruling of the district court. In Brunette versus City of Columbus, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals stated that, quote, conduct that occurred at least 14 years before an affirmative action consent decree was, quote, too remote to support a compelling governmental interest to justify affirmative action for it. In Coral Construction Company versus King County in 1991, the Federal Appeals Court in California said that government cannot impose racial preferences unless it is necessary to remedy recent documented individual discrimination. I could go on and on about the court cases, but our courts have said that it's not equal protection under the law to those that would be forced to pay to provide financial giveaways to those that are just simply saying, we deserve it. And that's what you're seeing with these proposals. Now, again, I don't want this to become a denial of racism. There are instances of racism, and it should be resoundingly called out and repudiated. But simply screaming at the top of your lungs, racist or institutional racism, give me, I'm the victim, you should pay, you're the villain, that is nothing more than racism itself and a very divisive political ploy designed to perhaps distract from other failings. So let me tell you, what's interesting is that these commissions, they said, well, if you were ever arrested for a crime, that's racism. Okay, so the individual that broke the law, committed the crime, sentenced by a jury of their peers, that somehow is racism? Or if you merely lived in a community that was a majority African American, that must be racism. What's interesting, though, is they never once raised the question of Democrat school districts, Democrat-dominated school districts, Democrat-run school districts, where it's predominantly African American, having the worst standardized test scores. I'm serious. I mean, all the time they're attacking police officers or housing as being institutionally racist because there's no equality of outcome. Well, take a look at the Democrat-run school districts. Take a look at those standardized test scores. In California, nearly 80% of African American students are failing math proficiencies. 80%. You want to talk about evidence of injury? Maybe we'd start looking at why are Democrat-run school districts hurting African American students so much with bad education. But of course, no. Never in neither the commission at the state level or in the San Francisco Commission did they ever look at African American achievement or lack thereof in school districts. Because they probably don't want to bring up that topic because they actually are the ones running the districts and are at fault. But I digress. Look, this proposal in California is likely going to be implemented. And then it will become a model for the nation. While it's caught up in court, yes, it'll be challenged in court. Eventually, it'll be thrown out. But just the passage of these reparation proposals in California, and I expect it to definitely happen in San Francisco, and we know something is going to happen in the state legislature. It is all designed to provide a model for the rest of the nation to force this conversation in other states. In fact, the author of the Reparations State Commission bill, then Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, said, quote, when she introduced the bill, if California can admit its sins and change the narrative, then there is a way forward for states and cities across the nation. Oh, they know exactly what they're doing. This is not about trying to right a documented wrong. This is about changing a narrative. She admits it. It's a narrative. She doesn't even say admit sins and fix the problem. No, it's about a narrative that somehow racism is everywhere, that there are groups of victims and the victimizers are sitting over there. And of course, what will happen when these reparation proposals are thrown out in court? When people oppose these proposals, the Democrats, who have failed the African American community on so many fronts, those aforementioned schools being one example, they'll come out and say, we wanted to give you $5 million and we wanted to give you $97,000 a year for the rest of your life. And we wanted to give you a free home for just $1. But it's those racist white people. It's those racist conservatives. It's that Supreme Court majority of conservative justices. They took that money from you. I mean, hey, we had the check right here. We were ready to hand you the keys to the house, but oh, so sorry. Who does that? I'll tell you who does that. Race-baiting fraudsters. And there's no better way to describe the folks that are advancing these proposals. Race-baiting fraudsters. So look out for these proposals in a state near you. And if you are in California, reach out to your assembly member, your state senator. Raise your voice. Tell them that we don't need this distraction, this illegal and offensive set of proposals. We should be lifting everyone's economic prosperity, everyone's opportunities, safeguarding everyone's civil liberties. But that's not part of the conversation in these proposals. Join us at Reform California so we can fight back. It is our focus to stop crazy proposals like this and elect better common sense leaders for our state and local government. Go to reformcalifornia.org to sign up as a volunteer or to contribute. You also can continue to get news and information on these and other important topics at reformcalifornia.org. Thanks for watching. Help us break through the censorship of the liberal media by liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.